Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's Down the Rabbit Hole. This week we're back to Material Obsession 1, and we're talking about a quilt that's been a favourite of mine for a very long time. This is called Annie's Garden, and this quilt was designed long before I actually wrote Material Obsession 1. It was designed when I was teaching my very first patchwork class. So there's a nice little story that goes along with this quilt. So how I started teaching patchwork, I was making baby clothes and little embroidered jumpsuits and these little stuffed rabbits for a baby shop in Victoria. When I was living down there, my second baby was born down there, Oscar. And when I moved back to Sydney not very long after that, I went into a patchwork shop in Hunters Hill to buy a few bits and pieces of fabric. And then while I was doing that, I went along to a mother's group of sorts with some friends of mine, girls I went to school with and some of their friends who'd all sort of had babies around the same time. And they asked me to teach them how to sew because I was bringing all of the things that I was making for this shop. And so we used to sit in the park on a blanket with our little babies, and I taught all of these girls who had never sewn a button on in their lives how to sew. And as we progressed through, a couple of years of them learning to sew and what have you, one of them said to me, I would like to make a quilt, which was a huge thing. These were girls that literally had never sort of threaded a needle or done anything, and they were taking things off to the tailor to have their buttons sewn on, and I was just like, that is not happening. So eventually, after a while, not all of them, but quite a few of them got pretty excited about the whole situation. They wanted me to teach them how to make quilts. And so one girl in particular, Sam, who has been my friend all the way through school and is still my friend today, and our sons are best friends as well, asked me to design a quilt for her to make for her daughter Annie's bed. Annie is now 26, so this is a long time ago. And Annie, I think at this point was maybe 5, something like that, and so I sat down and drew up what was my first ever applique design. And this is it, Annie's Garden. And I have been living in Melbourne, and I used to go into what was then called Patchwork on Central Park, which was the first shop that was owned by Jen Kinwell and her friend Lynn at that point in time. And they had the very first Amy Butler fabric that was ever designed. And I bought my very first pieces of Amy Butler. Sorry, that's the dog going under the quilt, sorry about that. Very real things going on here. It was my very first bits of Amy Butler. So here are some of the very first pieces of Amy Butler that were ever in Australia. It was incredibly exciting. It was new and fun and different and bright, and it was so exciting to me to see fabrics like that, and I just jumped straight on them and bought them immediately. So when I made this quilt, I used them in there because this was a big deal for me, this quilt, and I thought maybe a patchwork magazine might publish it or something. I was pretty excited about the whole idea that I was designing this thing. So I designed it, I put it all together, I made the quilt. Sam also made her quilt for Annie, and I think Annie still has it to this day. It still hangs around somewhere. And I'm not sure that Sam made a huge amount more quilts after that, but she did make some more quilts, I think. Pretty sure I designed one for her son Robbie and a few other bits and pieces, but this is the quilt that's gone on to endure. So it's been a lot of people's very first applique. Unlike most of my applique today, this is not needle turn applique. This is blanket stitched, so it's been fused down, and then I've hand blanket stitched all around all of the pieces. So you can see all of the hand blanket stitching around here. For any of you that want to try it, I've used 2 strands of thread, not one, and then I've hand quilted just a little bit with the pearl cotton. This is way back in the day when we were some of the first people doing the hand stitching with the pearl cotton, and people used to tell me that my quilts would never win awards quilted like that. Well, they were quite wrong about that. I do love to prove them wrong. But if you are looking at starting an applique quilt and you've never done any applique, this one is such fun to make. It's very easy patchwork. It's a beginner quilt, as a lot of the ones in Material Obsession 1 are. The most difficult piecing in it is those pinwheels. They're pretty simple to put together, really. If you can sew a half square triangle, you can sew these. And you can see that my patchwork on them is not 100% perfect. I've missed a point there. This was a long time ago, girls. Give me a bit of slack. But this little quilt ended up in Material Obsession 1. And I think we had just opened the shop, maybe. We certainly didn't have a book deal anyway when I first made a pattern out of this, and we used to have kits for it in the shop way back in the day. And then when we actually were writing the book, this was one of the first ones that we chose to go in it because it's been a bit of a perennial favourite. So that is the story of Annie's garden. And if Annie's watching this, hello. And if you would like to make it, the pattern is obviously in Material Obsession 1. You can get the book and the pattern as a printed or a PDF at my website, sarahfilkey.com. And if you make it, please let me know because I'd love to see what you've done with it. See you next time. P.S. Forgot to close that bit of the loop in the story. So the shop that I went into to buy the bits of fabric in order to teach my first patchwork class was then called Hullman Cottage, and that is the shop that I bought that became Material Obsession. So there you go.